It started with a blink, not a loud accusation or dramatic confrontation, just the dull hum of fluorescent lights, the blue-gray glow of a spreadsheet, and a single blink of my inbox refreshing. I was the only one left on the office floor, again. Second. Week of late nights, and I told Sammy I'd be home by 10. He didn't argue anymore. He just asked if I wanted him to reheat the curry or if I'd already eaten. His voice was kind, but there was a softness now that made me ache. Like he was already making room for my silence. I leaned back in my chair, rotated my wrist. The weight of my wedding ring against the keyboard was suddenly too heavy, so I slid it off. Just for a moment. Just to finish this report. That's when the email came in. FWD. Compliance documentation, internal root notes. The subject was vague, but the sender was clear. HR, but not to me. It had been forwarded by mistake. Likely meant for someone 2 floors up. I hesitated, hovered my mouse, then clicked. 3 paragraphs, cold, bullet-pointed, strategic, employee. Zara Siddiqui, behavioral flags noted. Non-participation in informal culture building. Ref, travel offer. Mentorship sessions, recommended route. Phase disengagement. Begin by limiting tech access. Reassignment of non-critical accounts. IP flagging for external correspondence review. Initiated by Rafiq Ali. Reread it. Again. The lines didn't blur. They sharpened. I sat completely still. Not even my breath dared interrupt the silence. Phase disengagement. IP flagging. External correspondence. They were planning to erase me. But not all at once, quietly, like a slow bleed. So I'd never know where it started or how to fight it, and Rafiq, he initiated it. Rafiq, who 3 days ago leaned across my desk and whispered, "There's a conference in Dubai next month. I'd like you to be the only one who comes." He said it like a gift, like I was lucky to be chosen. Like Sammy, my husband of 12 years, didn't exist. Like my kids' drawings pinned to my cubicle wall were decorations, not lifelines. I'd smiled. Professional, gracious. I'd said no. I'd said I had responsibilities. I'd said it carefully, respectfully, and he'd smiled back. But something in his eyes had cooled like a warning. I thought that was the end of it. Just a bruise to ignore, like all the others women in this office had learned to live with. But I was wrong. It wasn't a bruise. It was the trigger. My screen flickered. Then, again. Then black. For a split second, I thought the power had gone out. But then the fluorescent lights above me stayed humming. The HVAC whispered through the vents. Everything else was alive. Just not my screen. I pressed the keyboard. Tapped the mouse. Nothing. Our EBOOTED. Still nothing. When I reached for my phone to contact IT, it buzzed before I touched it. A security alert. New login detected from Rawalpindi. That was over 2 hours away, but I hadn't moved out. My heart lodged somewhere. Between my ribs, I checked my IP. It had changed. Automatically rerouted. I stood, my chair screeching behind me. A sound that felt too loud for the space. My breath started to climb into my throat, heavy, unfamiliar. I dialed Sammy. He picked up on the second ring. "Hey, you okay? You're late." I tried to speak, but what came out was thinner than a whisper. "I think something's wrong." "What happened?" "They changed my IP address." He paused. "Who did?" "I don't know. I wasn't responding." "My access is gone. I just got an email from HR. It wasn't meant for me." I looked around. Empty chairs, dead computers, the buzzing glow of a vending machine at the far end of the hall. I had never felt more watched in my life. They're going to fire me, Sammy. They're building a case to make it look clean. A silence stretched on the line, then, "Where are you right now?" "Still here." "Don't move. I'm coming." I wanted to cry, not from fear, from something else. Something sharp and breathless. He still believed me. That small, simple truth gutted me. I sat back down slowly, hands trembling. My ring was still on the desk, glinting under the LED light like something sacred. I picked it up and pressed it too. My palm, not again, not another man who would decide how I got to exist in the world, not again. Rafik might control the keys, the systems, the whispers in HR, but he didn't control my voice, and he didn't know what I had just seen. The email still sat open on my phone. I screenshot it, then again, then sent it to my personal email, encrypted. I backed it up on a cloud drive, and just in case, I printed it from the receptionist's abandoned station downstairs. 1. Page.black ink.proof. I tucked it into my bag, slipped my ring back on, and exhaled. Long, steady by the time Sammy pulled up in the car and I stepped into the passenger seat. I had made a choice I didn't yet understand fully. I wouldn't run not yet first. I'd watch. I'd listen. I'd learn exactly what kind of man believed a firewall could erase a woman, because I had been silent long enough, and silence was no longer safety. It was strategy. I was 25 when I chose the safer dream. I had just finished my bachelor's in economics. Top of my class, a thesis advisor who all but begged me to apply abroad for grad school. But Sammy and I were already planning our wedding, and my parents, after years of worrying that I'd be too smart to settle, finally exhaled. I told myself I could always study later. Later became diapers. Then preschool. Then the silent ache of watching LinkedIn announcements float past like ships I was never on. I didn't resent motherhood, but there was a hunger I buried in nap schedules and school drop-offs. I missed the sound of my own heels on a polished floor, the rustle of paper that wasn't grocery lists. When our youngest started first grade, I decided it was time. I re-entered the workforce, not with entitlement, but with reverence. I was grateful just to be in the building. The firm Aleph Capital felt like a lifeline. A mid-sized investment firm with bold branding and glass walls that made everything feel open and important. I started in a junior role. Filed reports. Triple-checked numbers others glanced over. Stayed late. Said thank you more than I should have. My boss, Rafik, noticed. He said so on my first performance review. You remind me of the women who raised me, he said, smiling over a paperclip he twisted between his fingers. Strong, devoted. This place needs more of that. I smiled back, proud. Safe. In hindsight, I think I wanted so badly to be seen. As capable that I didn't care what lens he used to see me. The compliments started normal, polite, then they shifted. You're too pretty to be hiding in finance. Why waste a face like yours behind spreadsheets? You've got presence. That's rare in our field, especially in women. The first time he said it, I laughed awkwardly. The second time, I laughed because my male coworkers laughed too. The third time, I stopped noticing. I began to shrink in ways I didn't even register, changed my perfume, lowered my heels, avoided eye contact. When I presented an idea in a strategy meeting and Rafik echoed it 5 minutes later as his own, I didn't correct him. I thought I was being professional. Sammy noticed before I did. One night after dinner, I was sitting in bed going through reports on my laptop. He came out of the shower, towel around his waist, toothbrush in hand. Zara, he said gently, when's the last time you talked about your ideas with pride? I blinked. What do you mean? You used to get excited when you solved something. Now you hesitate before telling me. Like you're waiting for permission to feel proud. I laughed too quickly. You're overthinking. But deep down, I knew he was right. It wasn't just the job. It was me inside the job. How I sat straighter when Rafik was near. How I double-checked every email to him 3 times. How I always kept a cardigan at my desk, even in summer. I'd been taught that gratitude was noble, that it was the currency. Women paid to remain in male-dominated spaces. I hadn't realized I was bankrupting myself. One day, a younger female analyst, Amina, asked me, "Do you ever feel like you're being filtered?" "What do you mean?" "Like the better you get, the smaller your role becomes." I wanted to tell her no, that she was imagining it, that talent would always rise, but I looked her in the eyes and said, yes. Her relief was almost heartbreaking. Then came the late nights. It started with a team deadline. Rafiq asked me personally to stay behind. "You're the only one I trust with these numbers," he said. The first time, I felt flattered. The second, useful. The third time, I missed my daughter's school recital and cried quietly in the restroom. But when I got back to my desk, there was a mug of tea waiting. No note, just a quiet gesture. Rafiq passed by later, barely glancing at me, and said, "You're a wife, a mother, and you still work harder than most of the men here." I didn't know if it was a compliment or a curse. I said thank you anyway. There was a weight in that word. Thank you. I used it like a shield. Every time I accepted silence in meetings. Every time I downplayed my wins. Every time I pretended. Rafiq's gaze wasn't sweeping. Gratitude kept me safe. Or so I thought, but safety isn't the same as freedom. I told Sami everything, well, almost everything. I never told him about the perfume comment. Or how Rafiq once leaned over my chair too closely under the pretense of reviewing a chart, and his breath landed on my collarbone. I didn't want to worry him. I didn't want to sound hysterical. Besides, nothing happened. That was the trap. When nothing concrete happens, you're left doubting yourself. Death by 1,000 suggestions. No fingerprints, just shadows. And I was trained to endure. Like so many women are, smile, nod, be grateful, be appropriate, be aware, be careful. I followed all the rules, and they were using those rules to erase me. That's what gutted me the most when I saw that email in my inbox, not the betrayal. Not even the strategic cruelty, but the realization that all my efforts to be the right kind of woman had only made me more disposable. I wasn't being let go because I failed. I was being erased because I said no. And for the first time, I saw my compliance for what it was, a script I had memorized so well. I'd forgotten I was allowed to stop acting. It was almost 7:30 p.m. when I heard the door click shut behind me. The break room lights hummed overhead, flickering slightly like they always did. A vending machine buzzed in the corner. I had come in for tea. Just 5 minutes to breathe. Then I heard his shoes slow, measured across the laminate floor. Zara. Just my name, nothing more. But the way it rolled off his tongue made it sound like a verdict. I didn't turn right away. I pressed the hot water button on the dispenser, watching the steam rise from my mug like smoke from a dying fire. I wanted to believe that if I stayed quiet, maybe he'd just walk away. But predators don't walk away when prey is quiet. They stepped closer. I turned. Rafiq stood only a few feet from me, one hand in his pocket, the other holding a pen he twirled absently. His tie was loose, his sleeves rolled. He looked casual, relaxed, like he hadn't orchestrated my slow erasure just days ago. "I saw you still on the floor," he said. "Thought I'd check in." "I'm fine," I replied, voice clipped. "You've been a little distant lately." "I've been busy." He nodded like he understood. Like I was a stubborn child refusing affection. "I meant what I said about Dubai, you know." "I already answered you." He didn't move. Sometimes one answer doesn't mean the end of a conversation. It just means the beginning of honesty. I tightened my fingers around the mug handle. "I'm married." "I know," he said, stepping closer, "but that's never stopped anyone." I backed up slightly, bumping into the edge of the countertop. The tiled wall was cold against my back. He stopped just short of closing the space, but it was enough to make my skin crawl. I've worked too hard for this role, I said, and I won't jeopardize it for anyone. His smile faltered. Just slightly, then he leaned in and whispered, "You'd be surprised how quickly hard work becomes irrelevant when someone decides you're no longer useful." I said nothing, so he added softly, "And once you lose your place here, who will you be then?" There was no venom in his tone. That made it worse. It was like watching someone pour gasoline while smiling gentle, unbothered. "No," I said. It wasn't loud, but it was enough. My voice held. "No." He paused, just for a second, then backed away. "Shame," he murmured. "You had potential." Then he left, and I stood there, heart pounding like fists on a locked door, the mug still shaking in my hand. The unraveling began the next morning. First, my login failed. Then I was locked out of the shared drive. No calendar access, no email. Just a generic error message. When I called IT, they said the system showed I'd requested a deactivation as part of an internal transfer. "I didn't request anything," I said. There was a pause. "Oh, that's strange." It wasn't strange. It was strategic. My accounts were stripped. The quarterly review I'd let gone, reassigned. My name vanished from the project credits. At lunch, I passed a group of colleagues, whispering. One looked up and quickly turned away. "Did you hear?" She freaked out in a meeting. "Someone said she's going through something at home." I mean, she did get real close to Rafik for a while. Rumors bloom fast when you water them. With silence, I didn't speak. I didn't defend myself. I didn't know how. Part of me still hoped it would pass. But HR would see the truth. But the next day, I was called into a meeting. The room smelled like static and coffee. HR sat across from me. Rafik beside them, sleeves pressed and smile pleasant. "We've received concerns about your conduct," the HR manager said, her tone firm but falsely sympathetic. "Refusals to attend team events, concerns about a lack of cooperation." I stared at her. Is this a performance review or a punishment? "We're simply observing a pattern," Rafik said smoothly, as if he were just another observer. "It's not personal. We want to make sure Zara is aligned with the company's collaborative values." The word collaborative clung to me like oil. I left the room with a formal warning in my file. Further resistance, they said, may result in disciplinary action. I walked home that day instead of taking the bus. The sky was cloudless. People moved around me, laughing, shopping, living. I felt like I was fading out of my own life. Like I'd been plucked from the picture and no one noticed the missing frame. At home, Sammy took one look at me and said nothing. He just wrapped his arms around me and let me shake. That night, my daughter crawled onto the bed beside me, her small fingers brushing my arm. "Mama," she whispered, "why do you look like someone stole your favorite thing?" I couldn't answer because I didn't know what my favorite thing was anymore. The final blow came. The next morning, I powered on my work computer at home, trying to log in one last time. A blank screen. Then a notification, remote wipe in progress. Contact your administrator. My inbox erased. My reports gone. Personal files I'd stored by mistake, photos, notes, obliterated. And then my phone buzzed. A bank alert. Your account is under internal review due to a flagged reimbursement. Suspicious activity reported. I blinked at the screen. No, that couldn't be. I'd submitted that travel reimbursement request 2 weeks ago for train. Fare to a client site. The proper form. The correct documentation. I clicked into the digital ledger. My name. My login, but the amounts were wrong. Grossly inflated. Unauthorized expenses attached. An extra hotel night. A minibar charge I never made. My IP. My device. My betrayal. Rafik had hacked my credentials. falsified the documents, planted evidence, built the lie. I was no longer just expendable. I was now culpable. I stared at the screen for a long time. The cursor blinked like a taunt, like a countdown. I played by every rule. Stayed late, stayed silent, stayed grateful, and in return, I'd been rewritten as the villain in a story I didn't author. The humiliation was too complete for anger, but in the hollow that followed deeper than grief, something else took root. Not rage. Not even revenge. Resolve. The kind that doesn't scream. It studies. It watches. It sharpens. It waits. They wanted me to disappear under the weight of shame, but shame no longer fit me. It slid off my shoulders, like a coat I never asked to wear, and beneath it, I found something colder, something clearer. I didn't vanish. I just stepped sideways, not out of town, not out of reach, just out of his reach. No formal resignation, no final words. I simply stopped showing up. My cousin Zoya had a small flat on the other end of the city, a 4th floor. Walk up with too much noise from the street and too little space, but the moment she saw me on her doorstep with a duffel bag and swollen eyes, she just stepped aside and said, "Tea or silence?" I chose silence. I stayed in her guest room, really. Just a storage space with a mattress shutting the door against the world I no longer belonged to. I deleted my social media, scrubbed my presence from company profiles, changed passwords, set up new email accounts. The first week was a blur of sleep and static. The second, I began to breathe again. I visited my old university for the first time in years. Sat in the library where I used to pull all-nighters over textbooks and vending machine coffee. This time, I wasn't there for grades. I was there for knowledge. For tools, books on digital forensics, cybersecurity, employment law, harassment in the workplace, legal self-advocacy, case studies on whistleblowers. I didn't devour them. I dissected them carefully, methodically. Every annotation felt like stitching up a wound no one else could see. By day, I studied. By night, I worked. I picked up freelance work with a virtual firm run by women mothers, caretakers, second chance seekers like me. They didn't ask why I had a gap in my resume or what I was running from. They only asked what I needed to thrive. I said, privacy. They said, granted. They paired me with quiet clients, data entry, schedule management, work that paid modestly but steadily. My tasks grew, little by little, and for the first time in months, I logged into a system without fearing who was. Watching Sammy visited me every weekend. He brought groceries, held me when I shook in the middle of the night, left notes in my laptop case. Small things. Proud of you. Keep going. You are not what they tried to make you. He never pushed, not even when I shut down mid-sentence, not even when I cried in the middle of breakfast. He just stood still, sturdy as a lighthouse. You don't have to climb. He once whispered, brushing a strand of hair from my eyes, just heal. And I did, not fast, not loudly, but deeply. 2 months into my exile, I came across a moment that changed me. The firm's internal group chat pinged one evening. A junior intern, Lena, barely 22, posted in the support channel, "Sorry if this isn't the right place, but does anyone have advice on what to do when your team lead keeps messaging you late at night? I thought it was work, but he keeps asking weird personal things now. And probably overthinking, just confused." The chat went still, a few supportive emojis, 1 or 2 vague messages of encouragement, but no one named it. And before I could stop myself, my fingers moved. You're not overthinking. You're being tested. And they test you by making you doubt your instincts. You don't owe him anything outside work hours. Document everything. Keep screenshots. And know this isn't your fault. It never was. I didn't sign my name. Just sent the message and closed my laptop. My heart was pounding. My palms were cold. What had I just done? But I didn't regret it. The next morning, I woke up to a direct message. Whoever you are, thank you. I didn't know what was happening until I read that. You saved me from something I didn't know was wrong. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I smiled. It wasn't joy. It wasn't triumph. It was recognition. The woman I used to be, compliant, careful, grateful, would have said nothing. She would have told Lena to just be polite or to talk to a jar if it gets worse. But that woman was gone. The one who remained understood power now. Not how to hold it, but how it's taken. Piece by piece. Silence by silence. A week later, I bought a notebook. On the first page, I wrote, "This is no longer survival. This is blueprint." I sketched timelines. Outlined every detail I remembered about Rafik's manipulation. Dates, phrases, expressions. Company protocols, odd system logs. Inconsistencies in reimbursement files. Project reassignments. I no longer needed proof to believe myself, but I was going to build it anyway. The more I wrote, the clearer it all became. This wasn't a series of accidents, it was a system. And I had been its prototype, but now I was its DOCUMENTRIN.ZOY, started calling me the librarian. "You're always scribbling, always researching," she teased. "What are you planning? A book?" I smiled. Something like that. She didn't press. Some nights, we stayed up on the balcony drinking chai and listening to the city hum. I told her pieces of it, just enough. She nodded quietly. "You're still soft," she said once, "but sharper now. Like silk with a blade." And sighed. I like that. Healing didn't look like some grand sunrise. It looked like grocery lists. Like applying for a pill box. Like buying a new scarf in a color. I never used to wear It looked like asking Sammy to update the locks on our apartment. Like finally deleting the last saved email from Aleph Capital. Like listening to my daughter's bedtime stories and not drifting halfway through. Thinking about who I used to be. Little wild roots growing in the cracks. And with every new page of that notebook, I realized something. I didn't need to return to who I was before. I just needed to become the woman I would have trusted back then. And she was finally rising. The first thing I did was reclaim my name, not for marriage, not from love. From the database, I filed for a legal record correction, made sure every trace of the fraud linked to my identity was challenged. I sent notarized statements to the Financial Oversight Board. I filed digital privacy complaints with a tech advocacy group, attaching copies of access logs, IP pings, timestamps, all of it mapped out in a quiet storm I had documented over weeks. Didn't speak with anger. I filed with precision. I became fluent in language they couldn't ignore. Compliance, whistleblower protocol, ethical breach, and then I became anonymous. Under an alias, I submitted a full report to an independent watchdog that monitored corporate misconduct. My file included reconstructed metadata, communication audit trails, deleted reimbursement requests restored through cache backups, and proof that access to my account had been rerouted through administrative override. It was a mosaic of digital. Betrayal with Rafik's fingerprints all over it. When the final packet was uploaded and encrypted, I sat back in my chair, staring at the screen. I didn't cry. I used to believe that pain had to be loud to be real. Now I knew better. Pain, when refined by purpose, becomes evidence. A week later, I ironed my blouse. It was the same color I used to wear at Aleph Capital, still blue, tailored, at the wrists. Back then, I wore it like armor. Now it was just fabric. I tucked it in, tied my hair back, and stepped into a sunlit conference room for my first in-person job interview in over a year. The woman across from me, Rumana, was the co-founder of a women-led digital solutions firm. Young, sharp-eyed, no nonsense. She smiled only with purpose. Your resume shows a gap. Do you want to speak to it? I nodded. I do. I told her the story. Not all of it, but enough. The manipulation, the sabotage, the false accusations, the silence, but I told it plainly, like reciting a case file, not a tragedy. When she asked what drives me now, I answered without blinking, knowing the difference between power and control, and helping others find it too. She sat back, studied me. You've done your homework, she said. I've lived it. By the end of the week, she called back. We don't usually offer project leads to new hires, she said, but I have a feeling you'll catch up faster than most. At home, I painted the front door soft blue, not to hide what had happened, but to make peace with it. The color of air after a storm. Sammy and I moved back in together. There was no great reunion speech, just boxes unpacked side by side. One night, I opened a cupboard and found a teacup. Inside it, a folded note. I never stopped believing in you. I just needed you to believe in yourself. I didn't cry, I breathed. We replanted the herb garden in the balcony window box. Mint, basil, rosemary. My daughter helped alphabetize. Books in the living room, stacking them neatly like tiny towers of meaning. I got into the habit of journaling again. Not as a way to release pain, but to trace growth. One evening, as I flipped through the pages of my notebook, I realized something. I wasn't trying to prove anything anymore. Didn't want an apology from Rafik. I didn't want sympathy from HR. I didn't need people to say, we had no idea. I was no longer surviving. I was preparing because I knew what was coming. The watchdog agency had reached out, quietly, professionally. They were investigating. The case had traction. There would be consequences. They asked if I would be willing to testify or appear as a witness should the matter proceed into formal hearings. And I said yes. In the following weeks, I continued to build my new life. At work, I met younger women just beginning their careers. One of them, a bright, nervous graduate named Sana, confided in me about a supervisor from a former internship who'd once told her, if you're too shy to work late, you'll never be taken seriously. I listened, then asked, and what? Did you say to him? She shook her head. Nothing. I thought that's just how it is. I smiled gently. That's what they want us to believe. She asked how I learned to say no. I didn't, I said. Not at first. But when I finally did, it cost me everything, so I made sure that cost meant something. We stayed in touch. Weeks passed, and then one morning it arrived. A formal letter, embossed seal from the Ethics Oversight Board tied to Aleph Capital's governing structure. I opened it at the kitchen table. The board had completed a preliminary investigation. A series of internal violations had been found, including digital misconduct, HR non-compliance, and targeted manipulation of internal systems by a senior executive. They wanted me present for the upcoming review. Not as a victim. As a consultant. My hands trembled slightly, but not from fear. From recognition. This was the moment. The room I had once entered in silence, head down, was calling me back. But I wouldn't come in as the girl who begged to be seen. I would come in as the woman who documented her erasure and returned to write the final chapter, the night before the hearing. Sammy made me tea. You ready? He asked. No, I said. But I'm going anyway. He smiled. That's what makes you ready. The morning was gray but quiet. No wind, no rain. Just a stillness in the air like held breath. I wore a suit, simple, dark, nothing flashy. I pinned my hair up, not for professionalism, but for clarity. I wanted nothing falling into my face, no shadows, no distractions. I walked into the lobby of the building I once knew like the back of my hand, that same polished floors. Same receptionist, though she didn't recognize me, or perhaps pretended not to. When I was escorted into the boardroom, Rafik was already there. He looked thinner, grayer, still impeccably dressed, still smiling, but the confidence behind the smile was hollow now. He couldn't read me anymore. He didn't know who I'd become. I sat across from him. The room was full of HR officers, compliance reps, legal advisors. They shuffled papers, clicked pens. They spoke in jargon. I didn't interrupt. Not until I was asked to present. And when I did not raise my voice. I raised proof. Binders were passed out, each filled with annotated logs, redacted summaries, side-by-side comparisons of altered documents and original versions. I explained how user-level permissions could be exploited, how override systems were masked in admin panels, how timestamps revealed unauthorized edits, showed how those edits correlated precisely with the days I refused private meetings. And then I said, what you're looking at is not just misconduct. It's systemic vulnerability, and I was the test case. There was silence, and then one soft voice from legal asked, "Do you have any final statement, Miss Siddiqui?" I turned to Rafik, and I said, "You told me I was wasting my beauty behind spreadsheets, but I built a truth from every cell you tampered with. You tried to erase me, but erasure only works on those who stop speaking." I never stopped. I just changed platforms. He blinked out for the first time. He looked small, and I didn't smile because this wasn't vengeance. It was justice. Measured, precise, undeniable. That evening, I walked home through streets lined with blooming jacaranda. Purple petals fell around me like confetti. I didn't check my phone. I didn't look back out at the door. My daughter was waiting with a pot of mint. "Can we plan it now, Mama?" "Yes," I said. "Let's do it together." As we pressed roots into the soil, I thought of every woman who had ever swallowed her truth because speaking it seemed too dangerous. And I whispered into the earth, "Not anymore." There's something almost holy about walking back into the place that tried to erase you, not like a ghost returning to haunt it, no. Like a woman with evidence in one hand and her name fully restored in the other. The elevator ride was silent. I could see my reflection in the chrome panel, clean lines, calm eyes, the edge of a small silver pin on my lapel, the mark of the ethics consultancy I now represented. I wasn't there as an employee. I was a guest. A consultant. The compliance review had been scheduled under standard procedure, quarterly review of digital risk and ethical system checks. Routine, but I knew better. They were bracing for exposure. The whispers had started already. An external investigation had reached their board. Anonymous documents had leaked. Too organized to ignore, too sharp to dismiss, and now the woman they once tried to erase was here to explain how it was done. Meeting room was familiar, same oval table, same fake fig tree in the corner. But the mood was different. 10 people sat around the table, senior staff, legal advisors, 2 members from HR, and a woman from the external oversight agency, watching everything with a quiet, pointed gaze. And then there was him. Rafik. Flanked in his navy suit, jaw tight with smug calm, the same rehearsed smile that had once made me feel like prey. He nodded when I entered, as if this were just another performance review. As if the last 6 months hadn't been a war he thought he won. I didn't acknowledge him. I set down a stack of binders. 1 for each attendee, light blue covers, tabbed pages, detailed, dated, indexed. Then I began. "Today," I said, voice. We'll be looking at a pattern of vulnerabilities common in mid-sized financial firms. Specifically, how data can be manipulated internally without ever breaching external firewalls. Click. The screen lit up with a flowchart fake. Names, dates blurred. Hypothetical on the surface, but every bullet point was real. Here, I continued. We see a user with admin level access overriding financial reports submitted by lower level staff. No protocol, no secondary approval. Another slide. Here's how login credentials can be redirected manually without system alerts by someone with access to both HR permissions and internal IT routing protocols. Another. This one demonstrates how an employee's IP address can be spoofed to mimic access from a different city, effectively altering her digital trail. Eyes shifted. Pen stopped moving. No one asked questions yet, because they already knew. Slide after slide, I exposed his methods cold, technical, meticulous. I referenced generic usernames, stripped identifiers, but every line of code, every timestamp pointed back to one truth. This was not a vulnerability. This was a weapon. And then I closed the laptop. Now, I said, if you'll turn to the tab labeled Appendix C. They did. Tucked in those pages, a printed transcript and metadata. Log of a private recording. And then I pressed play. The audio filled the room. The hum of a vending machine. The click of shoes on tile. A voice, mine, quiet, steady. I've worked too hard for this role, and I won't jeopardize it for anyone. Then his voice. You'd be surprised how quickly hard work becomes irrelevant when someone decides you're no longer useful. Silence. And then one more line. And once you lose your place here, who will you be then? The recording. Stop. No one breath. HRS lead representative stood, silently retrieving a notepad from her bag. She began writing. Legal whispered something to the oversight officer, who was already typing on a tablet. I looked across the table at him. Rafiq's face had shifted. The smug curve of his lips was gone. His fingers tapped lightly on the table, betraying nerves he couldn't mask. He cleared his throat. This is taken out of context. That audio anyone could splice. I looked at him, just looked. No anger, no satisfaction, just clarity. You once said I was wasting my beauty behind spreadsheets, I said, voice low but steady. But I built a truth from the ruins you gave me. And you're the one who's been erased. The room remained quiet. Rafiq opened his mouth again, but the legal advisor raised a hand. Mr. Ali, please remain silent. This matter is no longer under internal review. The investigation is active and external. And just like that, he was no longer a boss. He was a liability. He stood, perhaps instinctively trying to regain control. But the oversight officer nodded toward security, waiting discreetly by the door. Rafiq paused, then sat down again. And for the first time, I saw it. The fear. The rest unfolded quickly. His access was revoked on the spot. A formal termination letter was issued that afternoon. He would face a full inquiry, both professional and criminal. Aleph Capital released a quiet internal statement 2 days later citing ethical breaches and leadership misconduct. But I was no longer watching for announcements. I had nothing left to prove. That weekend, we sat beneath the jasmine tree in the garden behind our apartment complex. The air was thick with scent white blossoms hanging heavy in the golden light. Sammy brought out tea in 2 chipped mugs. My daughter curled up on my lap with her favorite storybook, chattering about school, skipping half the words as she read aloud. I let her. Sammy looked over at me, eyes soft. You did it, he said. No, I said, brushing jasmine petals from my daughter's hair. We did. I didn't feel victorious. I felt clean, like someone who'd washed off a layer of skin she never needed to wear again. That night, as the sky turned indigo and the city hushed into sleep, I sat on the balcony and wrote in my notebook. He changed my IP, but he couldn't change my mind. And in the end, the only firewall I needed was my own worth, not rage. Not revenge dot, just truth, and the quiet power of becoming someone no one could ever digitally delete again.